Merci, monsieur l'ambassadeur. Merci, monsieur le vice-recteur. Nous allons...
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Mr. Vice Rector. We will now open the floor with the first panel. So I will invite the panelists to join me on stage, and so we will give out mics. So Virginie Bernois will not join us in person because she's in Paris, but will still join us virtually. And I will invite Jürgen Van Gaten, Yves Madre, and Justine Lipuma to join me on stage.
Bien, bonjour à tous.
Well, good morning, everyone. Yes, you can sit down there. That's perfect. The global food chain from farm to fork, from land to the table, as I've learned you can say too, represents 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. So we understand that agriculture and food are main challenges that we face. Those were reminded to us by our speakers this morning. And agriculture and food innovations can help us reduce these emissions. And that can also help us adapt our systems. So how can agriculture contribute to the transition of our food systems? What are the innovations? Are the French, Belgian, and European perspectives similar? We will discuss about it with Virginie Bernois, who is advisor on agriculture, food, and forestry at the General Secretariat for Investment to the Prime Minister in France. With Jürgen Van Gaten, who's Scientific Director, Agricultural Engineering, which is the Flanders Research Institute for Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. Yves Madre, who's the president of the think tank Farm Europe. And Justine Lipuma, you are co-founder and CEO of Micofito and vice president of La Ferme Digital, which we will discuss later on today. And personally, I am part of the civil society. I'm a project manager for the reconstitution of soil in the city of Roubaix, which is a city of 100 inhabitants on the other side of the border, not too far from here. To start our debate, we will talk about the French AgriTech with Virginie Bernois with the following question. How can the mix between the agricultural know-how in France with the power of the French tech can contribute to the transition? What are France's ambitions in that field? I can see you on the screen and I can give you the floor. Good morning, can you hear me? Yes, perfectly. Okay, I'm really sorry for not being with you in person, and I'm still very pleased to be able to join you virtually. So that's quite a broad question that you've just asked me. Maybe as an introduction, I can remind you, as it was already mentioned by His Excellency the Ambassador, that the agri-tech sector in France is widely supported at the political and investment levels. I am part of the General Secretariat for Investment, and so we support the investment program called France 2030, which ambition is to support innovation by investing in projects to really support the transition of all economic sectors. So I am going to talk about what France 2030 does in the tech sector, because this is what is at hand today. So we do several things, because in the agri-tech sector, we have several types of actions. So as a reminder, France 2030 invests in innovation, so that's an important dimension. It is the transformative aspect, so we really want to accompany actors in disruptive solutions to speed up, to accelerate the transition that was already mentioned in the introduction. And to give you a few figures, France 2030 in the agricultural and food program represents more than 2.3 billion euros invested in innovation. If I go into details for AgriTech, following the report that was mentioned in the preliminary remarks, requested by the Minister of Agriculture, Julien de Normandie, in the agricultural fair in 2022, we implemented supporting programs in our investment actions. So we will support fundamental research actions on AgriTech dimensions, and we will also really support the whole continuum to the implementation and the appropriation by the farmers. So that's very important to keep in mind. Our objective is really to find disruptive solutions for tomorrow's market and to allow present day and future farmers to use them and to really have a big impact in their own territory. So I will talk about several measures for AgriTech. We have more than 660 million euros that are mobilized in our plan. We have a plan that is agroecology and digital with more than 50 million euros from INRAE here in France. And its ambition is to focus on research on the connection between agroecology and what the digital world and data can bring to it. We also have a big robotics challenge with the company called Robagri, which really focuses on the emergence of the agri-tech business in France. And the idea is to connect research actors and industrial actors. We also have calls to projects, for example, innovate for agroecological projects and innovate for tomorrow's needs with more than 200 million euros of budget. And so the idea here is really to focus on technological solutions. So we will have stakeholders that are going to come and test very concrete solutions on the field so that they can access funding to do so. We also have two other measures. For example, one where we allow you, once you have your prototype, to implement it, so to pre-select materials. So that is with a budget of 25 million euros. And then the last project is agro-equipment for the third agricultural revolution, where we allow the implementation of technologies. So very concretely, we select innovative materials, and on the basis of that selection, farmers can go to a French body that will give them subsidies for very innovative materials. So the idea here is to really promote new technologies and to promote the appropriation of those by the farmers. So that's essential, and this is what we want. And then, as a quick reminder of why we do that, you have said it. You have rightly said so. So I'm not going to go into details. But our objective is to really implement solutions to have a more sustainable, efficient, and competitive agricultural world that would have positive impacts on the environment. For example, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the reduction of water usage, which is a huge issue in France at the moment and probably in Belgium too. We also want to reduce our energy consumption and focus on the health and well-being of animals. And then we also want to keep having farmers who want to be farmers and do their job. So we will focus on the well-being of farmers.
Thank you very much. We will come back to you. You talked about the renewing of the new generations of farmers, And we know that a lot of French farmers are going into retirement in the years to come. So this issue is essential, of course, because there will be 10 billion of people who will need to eat by 2050. And so we also need to think about carbon neutrality. So thank you very much for this presentation of the French policy. We are going to come to Belgium with Jürgen van Geiter. You're Scientific Director, Agricultural Engineering of ILVO. So Flanders Research for Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. And what is the role of AgriTech, and how can we support the development and the dissemination of the AgriTech solutions for the broader public, and we will hear about it.
PowerPoint. Et donc,
I believe you have a PowerPoint presentation.
il nous faudrait la petite zapette.
So we will need our remote control. Yes, we can hear you, and I will give it to you so that you can control it directly. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be invited here to talk with you about AgriTech and our point of view at ILVO. I like speaking French, but if I'm allowed to do so, I would like to switch to English because most of the words are in English anyway, and it will go quicker and will be easier for me as well.
The next 5-10 minutes, well, between 5 and 10, I will talk about how ILVO uses smart research and innovation in AgriTech, in agri-food tech, because the food is also important in our point of view, and how we use that to drive or to push towards more sustainable food systems in Europe. I already was introduced, but ILVO is what we like to call the agro-food valley. There we are situated very close to the very beautiful city of Ghent. We have 4 big units there that work around plant sciences, animal sciences, social sciences, and also technology and food sciences. The unit where I am working and where I'm managing everything what has to do with digital agri-food. Important to know here is that ILVO is covering the whole chain. We're working, as already was introduced, from the field to the fork, but also the other way around. We also look at challenges that the consumer has, and we try to bring them back all the way to the farm and to find solutions over there. Also, ILVO is not making a choice in supporting one farming model or the other. We are there for all farming models. That means as well the farmers that want to produce for their local community at small scale, as the ones that are going for the smart farming model, where they are trying to produce efficiently and sustainable for a world market. When I listed for this discussion the main technology challenges that we have, and I focused mainly on the technology that are related, of course, to this twin transition that Europe wants to achieve, green and digital, I have 6 main focus points for ILVO. First of all, although we see data appearing everywhere, we are still convinced that qualitative data is not enough available. And if it is available, it's not semantic interoperable, which means that the machine readability, the understanding of the data, the annotation of the data is still a big problem. And another one that I think, especially when we talk about data access and technology, is that we are still focused or confronted with power imbalances in the market, and that small SMEs, and of course also the farmers, have difficulties getting access to the data. And also related to that is that a lot of farmers, at least in Flanders, have the feeling that they do big investments in technology, that they buy smart machinery, that they put their data into the chain, but that the value is not always created at the farm. The value is created in other places in the chain. And maybe the data should go up the chain, and the value should come a little bit more down the chain. I think that is also a problem for the moment, or a challenge. And then we have this challenge of the adoption. We see a lot of nice technology, a lot of investments in AgriTech, but still we see that farmers are not fully adopted this technology. So work is to be done there, and that relates to another challenge that I see, or that I propose, is we don't have enough possibilities to test in real life conditions. If you want to make technology market ready in farming, when you work with biological, living material, you need a lot of testing. You need to test in real life conditions, in different conditions. And that is still a challenge. And then the last one, I think you noticed, is not a technology challenge, because In many cases, or more than often, we see that technology is not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is trust of the end user, trust of the farmer in this technology, especially if we talk about data. If you want farmers to share their data, to make their data available, we have to see that technology gives them control of their data. We talk about data sovereignty. We talk about making the farmer in control of his data. And there we relate to what we know as the code of conduct in agriculture. And for ILVO, it's very important to acknowledge that the farmer, as producer of the data, is also the owner of the data and should stay in control of the data. How do we... Okay, there's a little default in the animations here, but we will solve it. How do we approach this practically at ILVO? First of all, we start from a strong interdisciplinary competence center, where we have some real focus points, like for instance on robotics and AI, but I have no time to go into our focus points now. But that we relate to what we call taking a role as a digital innovation hub, where we work in what we call network-driven. That means that we are trying to be a one-stop shop, that we try to orchestrate this very complex ecosystem, going from research, farmers, business, governmental, investments. This is where we try to be in the middle and to support all stakeholders. And knowledge transfer is very important for us there, promoting the knowledge transfer. That we are doing this promotion of the knowledge transfer to enforce our innovation ecosystem. As you see, sometimes technology is the problem, because I see that the animations are not shown as it should be, but okay. So these points, promoting knowledge transfer, innovation, reinforcing the innovation ecosystem are very important for us. And we combine this first component, competence center, digital innovation hub, with the third important component from the living lab approach. This living lab approach means that we involve the end user very strongly from the beginning, that we bring him in contact with all stakeholders, and that we do co-creation. We want to develop market-ready solutions that are really useful in practice for our farmers. And that is why we need urgent involvement of these farmers, and we want to apply multiple methods to do so. Also, in the governance of this living lab, we include the farmers, so they have their say on how we should deploy our technology. So here we work use case driven. We focus also on supporting policy and regulations from these living labs, and as I already said, there's a strong focus on research and development in real life conditions. In the end, this strong connection with the end user is what challenges us to stay in continuous learning and continuously updating our knowledge and competence center. And finally, maybe the seventh strategic point, but very important for us, ILVO is very active in the European scene, in Digital Europe, in Horizon Europe, and there we work with collaborative partnerships. We have strong strategic partners in Europe, and some important partners are actually situated in France. Very quickly, when we put this into practice, we promote a four-layer approach. That means we start from strong data collection with innovative technology. We bring this data together in what we call the agricultural data space, and then we put on top smart applications, applications using AI, applications using life-size assessments, and very strongly focusing on sustainability to create what you see in the top, knowledge. I mean, just bringing data together to have a pile of data is not useful. You have to bring the data to applications, to smart applications, and create knowledge. This is how we work. In Europe, we have 3 lines. We work with projects on developing an open source software ecosystem. We work on this network of digital innovation hubs, and we work on everything what has to do with the data economy in food systems. Very recently, we were successful in bringing this together. I forgot, in most of these projects, we have a strong connection with France. This is very important today to point it out. So I put the projects there where we are working together with French partners. But very recently, this came all together in a very nice project. It's a quite big project. It's a 60 million euro project, where also France is one of the main partners, and where we, the next 5 years, will be developing services for AI companies, for robotic companies. Not building more research, not creating more data, but bringing all these developments to the market, supporting SMEs and also the big companies, but mainly the SMEs, in bringing this together. And we are looking very much forward here to work closely together with France. So this brings me to the end, and I chose to take this picture and not some technology picture, because this is a very nice example on how we do this end-user involvement. Just discussion with farmers on how our technology should work, and a beer and a coffee always helps to invite them to our mostly evening meetings when farmers have time. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Jürgen, and thank you for accommodating with the minor technological issues. We will now go to Yves Madre. You are the Director General of Think Tank Farm Europe, and we have two questions. How can AgriTech help? How is it a mandatory step if we want to have a successful transition of our food systems? We have already discussed that during the introduction. And second question, how is this vision shared within Europe, or is it specifically commonalities between France and Belgium? So those are two main questions for you, and maybe you can tell us a bit more about you and Farm Europe as well.
La technologie, merveilleux.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. Well, Farm Europe, in quick words, is a think tank that I would classify as a think tank that particularly focuses on the operational side of things. So we gather partners across Europe, the EU, from the scientific world, the economic world, and this diversity leads us to be able to study, to think about the realities, but also to support political evolution in Europe, regulatory evolutions too, and when needed, we can also draft up regulations on the negotiation table or before they land on the negotiation table. So we are not a think tank that would describe the ideal world in 2050 or 60, but we rather focus on the evolution, on the transition that we have talked a lot this morning, step by step, to meet our objectives very pragmatically. So why AgriTech and why precision agriculture, digital agriculture is important to us? Well, we have developed our work on this for several years now. Why? Well, because on the European level, we have two timelines in parallel, and there are not a lot of connections between the two. So don't be afraid of everything that you see on the slide, but here you have a very traditional timeline that is very well known by the European stakeholders, so the common agricultural policy. So it is being amended quite often, and then in green, you have the timeline of the Green Deal. So the CAP was born before the Green Deal. So the proposal was in 2018, and despite everything that we can say, despite everything that we hear, the two are not very well connected. Let's be clear here. So the Green Deal appeared with very clear ambitions and objectives, and one that seems very widely shared, which is the objective of a European agricultural sector that would meet carbon neutrality in 2035. So that's the objective. But now it's important to know how we can reach that objective. Well, we have Farm to Fork, which is a strategy that is divided in many initiatives, in many regulations, and we also see the restoration of nature and biodiversity, which is being discussed this week. And then the main question is how. If we want to sum up the 40 initiatives, regulation initiatives in Europe, in the framework of Farm to Fork, we have 5 figures to sum it up. So an objective in 2030 to reduce by 50% the use of chemical pesticides, minus 20% for fertilizers, 10% of lands that would be taken away from agricultural production for nature restoration, and 25% of surfaces to produce organically, and then to plant 3 billion trees. So those are the main figures. And I think it is where the debates that we will hold today and the work that we've been doing is very important. If we focus on the objectives, saying, okay, now it's your time to act, everyone is aware of the objectives. So we have the European Commission, French, German, Dutch, and other universities reach the same observation. Before the war in Ukraine, before the comeback of inflation in the EU, which is 10 additional % for our budget, we see more imports, and regarding the climate impact for the world, we cannot see the positive impact on the world. So the production outside of European borders really cancels the positive effect here. So this observation is only an observation, but is it positive? No, it is not satisfying, because we need to do and implement this transition. How? Well, we can decrease our production, but that has a cost. And we also forget our global food safety and food sovereignty. So those are two very important topics, or we can find a new consensus and new directions to take. And this need of consensus is highly important. I will take the image of DEP. In 2021, when we were talking about the Green Deal for the agricultural sector, the majority in the EP really supported this initiative. 2022, we are in the middle of negotiations, and there's no majority anymore. And depending on the topics, some people are going to vote against or in favor. But this week, potentially, we might reject the proposal on nature restoration in the Agricultural Committee. So we are not in a calm political world that would support the economic sector and the European citizens on this. So we need to find this consensus. And so the question is quite easy, actually. I will go through this slide because I don't have a lot of time anymore. Yes, indeed. So I'm not going to go into details here. We have a lot to say, but we might come back to that later. What I find very important here is really to reconciliate economy and environmental transitions. Those two are needed. We will not do one without the other. It will not work like that. And how can we do that? Well, with what you are going to discuss today, with what you are all working on, ladies and gentlemen. But even without expecting future developments, with what you have now, what can be applied on the field already, as it has been said by the first speaker today, what we need is investment in equipment, but also in training, in the human beings behind the sector. But we face a need to draft a real European investment plan, and not only on the country level. Well, it's a good thing that some countries are making progress, but we really need to support digital and precision agriculture within the farms, to support research, to support development, but we should not wait for it to be ready. We need to also implement what already exists. We have tried to identify what already exists, and depending on the sector, those are already helping to have between 10 to 60% of input savings. Well, thank you very much for this perfect transition. So you can give the remote to Justine Lipoma, who's the co-founder and CEO of Micofito and board member of La Ferme Digitale, Digital Farm. So we can think about drones, robots, precision agriculture, but AgriTech can also mean reconnection to the living. This is what you are developing within Micofito. Can you tell us more about your meaning of AgriTech and the expectations that you have regarding the question that was just asked? Now, what can we do? Well, hi everyone, and thank you very much for allowing me to be with you today. I'm very happy to be able to share a few elements on this topic. At Micofito and the Digital Farm, we think that AgriTech has various meanings. We have talked about drones, digital solutions that are important in this environmental transition and society transition. But we should not oppose that to the fact that we can also have a connection to the living, to be inspired by the living world, because nature seems to be quite meaningful, smart, and we have lessons to learn from nature. So we call that biotech, bio-inspiration, and we think that's also very rich. We are in a university, and I can imagine that we have already seen startups born from this university, deep tech projects. Okay, well, the sound is back. Okay, well, deep tech projects with a very strong R&D component. And that can also be inspired by research works. This is what we did in Micofito, because I'm from the research world. I'm a microbiologist. And we are very inspired by nature. So I will show you very quickly the biological concept that we use to get inspired daily. Micofito follows a quite important growth path, because we have seen that solutions are needed today and we need to invest. You have said so, and I agree. We know everything that is being done at the French level, and we are very lucky. But at the European level, we need to maintain our leader position in the agricultural transition. Our companies, our solutions, as soon as they are efficient on the field, they need to be implemented and made accessible to as many people as possible so that all our farmers in Europe can use them. So we use nature as aspiration, as association between plants and fungi. What I'm passionate about is what is invisible and how the invisible can have very visible consequences. So we work on the optimization of associations that are already 450,000 years. And these fungi that you can see here are in pink, and there's a network all around the plant, and that will help the plant to exchange with the soil at a higher level. And that will help the plant to feed in a more efficient way, to be more tolerant to stresses from bioaggressors, but also to external factors such as climate change. That's a main challenge at the moment. So this association we've been working on for 40 years, more or less, and today we understand better how it is done. And if we look at what is available to the farmers, we don't really use what has been described and demonstrated through research, because we only have products that use one species of these AMFs on a potential of probably more than 300 species. So we have 1/4 of biodiversity under our feet. And what's interesting here, and the question that we ask ourselves, the source of our work really, is to know how we can identify the best associations between plants and fungi. Because depending on the context, depending on the soil, depending on the plant, we can use different species and they're not always the same. So a generic solution for all contexts cannot work, because on the biological point of view, that does not make sense. So we have integrated technologies based on data usage, mega sequencing depending on the soils. We have developed prediction models to know which are the most adapted species to which plant and which context. We have a biobank because we also need to have those fungi available. So it is becoming slowly one of the main biobanks in Europe. Fungi that were already present in the soil but were forgotten. We forgot that soil is a living inhabited, that we can use it. We want to boost it and restore it to really give all of its elements to the plants. So we can intervene in different contexts to develop products that have between 5 and 20 species of adapted fungi. So we really have a patent on this solution of specific fungi. Well, since we started a bit late, we will also end a bit late, so that we can have more time, but we will also leave some time to the next roundtable. So you were talking about nutrients, but it also facilitates access to water, and water stress is a main issue today. So when we are talking about precision agricultural and the connection to the living, there's a main resource available. Yes, indeed, because fungi can also produce sponges that can maintain and stock water really close to the roots of the plants. So we have worked on various species, for example, on grapevine. So during droughts, there were between 30 to 40% of losses because of water stress, and we were able to revert those losses thanks to our solutions. Thank you. You also vice presidents of the digital farm that was co-founded by 5 startups. And your objective is to promote agriculture and digital solution for a more citizen-friendly agriculture. And so in the 15 minutes that we have left, I would like us to discuss that. Is it only the responsibility of AgriTech on the offer side? Or are they also uses or solutions maybe? Yves Madre was talking about the political side of things, but maybe on the side of society too, on the side of the fork, are there things that we can do too? Yes, indeed, it is essential. And this is why in the digital farm we have around 100 members. And our objective is to cover the whole chain from the farm to the fork. And the stake here is to have innovations on both sides of the industry. We want to answer the needs of new consumption models, new protein needs, for example. We also want to support farmers to sell and commercialize their products. We also want to promote new consumption models for the consumers. So we really have innovation across the chain, and citizens are involved in that evolution. There's a whole training and culture stake here. Explain that we can eat an apple with a black spot on it. That's okay, you will be fine. So that's also that challenge. And this is why we try to be present in various fairs. For example, the agricultural fair on which we were present this year with various conferences that were integrated innovation, farmers and citizens. All these stakeholders need to talk together and work on the French AgriTech that was launched 2 years ago with agenda, interministerial meetings, so that collectively we can work on both sides of the chain in terms of innovation. Innovation needs to be everywhere, and it can be anything too. It's not necessarily technology. It can also be social innovation. Question for you, Jürgen. You have talked about what AgriTech can and should do, but the question now is to know what technology cannot do.
The question is, what can technology not do? But maybe the question should be, what are we technology not using yet for? And what can it do more for us when it works together with the people? And the first thing that I touched on in the beginning of one of my slides is the value exchange. We see a lot of information from the farm going into the chain. And I think technology can also help bringing value back. That is an important one. And I think a role that we are that we are not using technology for yet is, I think we have to be honest, and that technology also created maybe a little bit of distance between farming and the consumers. We see big tractors, big machineries going up and down, and there is a little bit of distance between the consumer and the farmer growing. They don't understand each other so well anymore. And I think also technology can play a role there, because it's a concept that we call transparency has value, and I think farmers and consumers could use technology to exchange information. A farmer can use technology to show that this apple can be still very healthy, and all the good things that they've done to produce this apple sustainably, with less pesticide as we saw, with more organic farmer, all this information technology can be used to get this information to the consumer. And also the consumer, and this is the next step, can maybe send some information back, some feedback back to the farmer. And then I think where first technology, with the big technology created maybe a little bit a split, a bad understanding, maybe we can use technology to create new understanding, to exchange information, to create transparency. And I think there's a future for the farmers there. You still see some doubt sometimes to be very open, but a lot of farmers in Flanders could put on their farm with technology, I'm saving so much emissions, I'm doing all these good things, and they can use technology to promote all the sustainable things they're doing. I think there is a big chance, opportunity for technology.
Merci. Yves Madre, un peu la même question, là on a parlé.
Yves Madre, the same question. We talked about apples, and so with black spots we can still eat it. What about animal proteins being eaten today? I believe that today some dietary transition needs to happen. So how do you think it will happen? I will use what has been said. Technologies, plural, can be used. So agriculture is plural, and so the technological answers are also diversified. So an addendum, it might be obvious, however, it needs to be repeated. When we talk about technology, it impacts all the various types of agriculture, whatever the size of an exploitation. Years ago, we started working on digital farming. In Greece, average size 6 hectares. 1 hectare parcel is already a big one. So it still works. However, you need to think about the methodology. So we have various solutions, and we need to involve the consumers. And when we talk about the consumers and the message we want to convey, it implies education. Consumers, our children are already consumers, so it will not happen from one day to the next. We cannot just organize a big advertising campaign and then it would change. If that was efficient, then there would not be obese people anymore. However, that is not the case. So obesity is on the rise, so that means we need to rethink it, and it's a challenge for a generation. And we need to put science at the heart of our message too. And balanced diet means eating a little bit of everything. Nothing is bad. So it is a question of being moderate. And so when you talk about animal proteins, you need some, but you don't need too much. And when we talk about animal proteins, let's talk about it in a scientific way. And we need to talk about the size of agricultural land being used and what human beings are eating. What can human beings eat? Human beings eat vegetables and a whole various types of things. And we want to use science. And when we do that, we realize that bovine meat presents the best ratio for a meat between what nature gives us and what it needs to take to produce it. So if I eat grass, I will not digest it. It won't bring me anything. But the bovines, the cows, transform in a very efficient way nature's surface and bring us protein. And of course, we want, if we want to look also at how we are breeding the cows. Of course, if we were in the United States, our message would be different and our approach would be different. But this brings us back to say that the solutions are diversified, and there is a huge amount of work to do for the consumers. And the member states and the European Union need to seize the challenge, and they want to seize the case, and they need to work on their communication. We need to convince the consumers, explain to them. And then on the various stages of the chain, the production chain, we can bring digital solutions, biological solutions. I align myself to what you said, agroeconomic solutions, and varietal solutions. We have the new varietal technologies case report will be discussed at the European level end of June, beginning of July, and that is an essential file, and we need to talk about it, and we need to bring science back to the debates. And if we don't bring all those various solutions together, we won't make progress. And behind that, there is always the issue of the means. Do we have the means to make our ambitions come true? And when we have a cap value decreasing by 87 billion of euros in direct payments, what do we do? Well, there will be like a midterm revision in July, so we might discuss agriculture so as to support funding at the community level, for example, or we can also just not discuss it and not think about it. Thank you very much. Good time management. Virginie Bernon, we will finish with you. You can react to what Yves just said, but there was also this question of what can technology not do, and how do we deal with society changes? So we heard that technology can help us bring about this society transition and transformation when we think about dietary transition, for example. What do you think about that? Thank you very much. I think a lot of things have been said. Technology needs to serve ambitions, and France 2030 ambition is sustainable, healthy food for tomorrow. We want to keep feeding an increasing demography while reducing the negative impact of agriculture. And I also align myself to what has been said. We need to be as sustainable as possible from the agricultural point, but if we do not rethink our way of feeding ourselves, it will be difficult. So we need to, and as I said, we support innovation when it comes to dietary transition through a call for projects and research on new proteins, so diversification of proteins to be consumed. So in sustainable models, we know that we need to rethink our consumption of animal proteins. And for me, I believe that technology, again, needs to be at the service of a vision. So that is essential. Where do we want to be tomorrow? What is our ambition for our agriculture and our food? And how tomorrow, how can we make our agriculture, transform it in a carbon capture system? And how can we make the life of farmers also better? So we need to answer those questions. And it's not only a question of technology, it's organization, it's political will, and it's means at the service of our ambition. And I will finish on this last point. And I believe that Madame Lippuma said it. Let's not forget the living. So we need to have a symbiosis between technology and the living. We will never replace the living ecosystems, and our hope is to reinforce and to maintain those living ecosystems. And that is also a part of a vision that we should all carry collectively. Thank you very much for this conclusion. So AgriTech is there to be at the service of a vision. Thank you to our panelists for being here today. Thank you over there in Paris. So we will leave some room for the next conference. What are the challenges for AgriTech research and its applications, a Belgian, French, and European perspective? Thank you very much.